Let's go. Let's try and do the psukim. I'll tell you in advance, I don't know if we're going to get past 3 psukim. I know it sounds a bit exaggerated, but they're packed. You know, we want to try and understand it. Just the basic pshat with the whatever. So if you remember what we said last week, the bullet points were, number 1, why I have to read every pasuk. We said the Vilna Gaon says, right, that's the halakha, I have to read the whole Megillah, because in every pasuk, the Vilna Gaon says, you see something with a nes. We learn from each pasuk. That's number 1. Number 2, why is the Megillah so special? We said, we mentioned the Rambam. The Rambam says at the end of Hilchot Megillah that all the Sefarim of the Ketuvim, Nevi'im Ketuvim, he seems to say, Batel, only the Megillah will carry on to exist. It's Machlokit Rishonim, but the Rambam seems to say, we said, what's so special about the Megillah? Again, we mentioned the Vilna Gaon, that it was something special. It was all in Chutz La'aretz, with Hester Panim. There were no open miracles. It wasn't like Yitzit Mitzrayim when Hashem, did Kriyat Yam Suf and did open miracles. It wasn't the time of that. It wasn't in Eretz Yisrael with the Beit HaMikdash like it was in Hanukkah. It was in Galut. We were downtrodden. We'll see it's the end of the Galut, the 70 years in Galut Bavel. And nevertheless, Hashem still did wonderful miracles, albeit hidden miracles, which we said the Vilna Gaon refers to as Atzat Hashem. We'll see again and again as he turns the screws in people's minds, as the Rebbe writes in his Sefer. And that's why it's so important. We said that, and the idea of Purim, which again we're going to see from here is how the Rambam says, I think in Sefer Mitzvot, that we learn from Purim that prayer works. It works. Hashem Moshiach Melech Ya'aninu B'Yom Koreinu. Remember I said last week, if you look at it, I don't know if you noticed the next day, Hashem Moshiach, we just say in Arvit already, Hashem Moshiach Melech Ya'aninu B'Yom Koreinu, right? And you'll see in Shachrit, you'll see at least 5 or 6 times. Again and again, Hashem Moshiach Melech Ya'aninu B'Yom Koreinu. We call out to Hashem, answers, right? Anyway, that was in a nutshell. Now, says the first pasuk, what we're going to do is, we're trying to do also Rashi, where there is Rashi. There's not actually that much Rashi on Megillah, right? Not in every pasuk, for sure not. And then we'll do the Vilna Gaon, together. Okay, now, if you'd like to open up your Megillat Esther, everyone's got it open, Pasuk Aleph, Perek Aleph, Pasuk Aleph. Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh hamolech mihodu v'ad kush, sheva v'esim u'me'ah medina. Okay, you're in the mood, Now, the Rashi says, you can look at Rashi that you've got in front of you. Rashi says, Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh, Melech Paras haya, shemalach tachat koresh, l'sof 70 shana, shana shel galut Bavel. This Achashverosh was a Melech of Paras, who ruled after Koresh at the end of the 70-year exile in Bavel. Now, it says, Hu Achashverosh, we'll do Rashi now. Hu Achashverosh is Rashi, what does it mean? He was Achashverosh. Hu berish'ah mitchilato v'ad sofo. He remained in his rish'ut, in his evilness, from the beginning till the end. Rashi doesn't say how we know that, he just says it's a fact. That's the Chazal say in Masechet Megillah. Now, the Vilna Gaon explains, I'm sure you're aware of this, that he says, when it says Hu Achashverosh, there were 2 Ahash, how do you say it in English and how you say it? No, in England they have it in English. There's an English word of saying. Anyway, 2 Achashveroshes there were. One was the father of Daryavesh. Daryavesh mentioned in Sefer Daniel, right? When it says Bishnat Echad Daryavesh ben Achashverosh Mizera Madai. That's a pasuk in Daniel, right? So it says V'hime Achashverosh Hu Achashverosh Hamolech Me'odhu V'ad Kush. Explains the Vilna Gaon that the Megillah is telling us, get right which Achashverosh it was, because he was Molech Mehodu Ve'ad Kush. Now, Rashi explains, look in Rashi, 2 things Rashi says, we'll see, 2 comments. He says, one was, Shemalach Me'atzmo V'laya Mizera Melucha. That's the word Hamolech. It wasn't say who was the Melech. It should say, V'yeh b'mei Achashverosh, who Achashverosh, Hamelech, who was the king, Mehodu Ve'ad Kush. What does it mean, who ruled over? Because he was a ruler, he was not a king. Right? Chazal say he was actually a stable boy. He used to look after the royal horses, in the royal stables. That's about as far as he got. But he was a stable boy, which we'll see more of that later on. And Mehodu Kush, Rashi explains what does Mehodu Kush means. And Molech Hamer 27 Medinot, Kumo Shmalach Mehodu Kush She'omdim Zeh Etzel Zeh, which basically means that he was a world ruler. He was a king over the world, the civilized world as was known at that time. And the Vilna Gaon explains that's another reason why we know that's what it's trying to tell you who he was. Hu Achashverosh Molech Mehodu Kush, meaning on the world, whereas the Achashverosh the first, who was the father of Daryavesh, was only the Melech of Madai. But this was a Melech, who Achashverosh, you want to know which one it was? He was the one who was a world leader. Okay? Now, that's what Vilna Gaon says. Now again, Rashi says a very important comment. This thing, he was a commoner. It's a very important piece of information we're going to see more, right? How important it is. Again, a lot of what I'm saying, apart from what's in the Vilna Gaon itself, is what it's Rav Brevda writes and talks about. Rav Shlomo Brevda. Now, it says 127 Medinot. Now, the Vilna Gaon explains as follows. He says, it says in the Medrash that of the 127 provinces, countries, 100 of them were dry land on continents, whatever, part of a continent, and 27 were islands. 27 were islands. How do we know? So if you go to the end of the Megillah, Perek Yud, right to the end of the Megillah, Perek Yud, that's why it's good to see it inside, The Vilna Gaon explains, look at Pasuk Aleph. What does it say? This is a few psukim, 3 psukim in the whole Perek. Vayasem HaMelech Achashverosh mas al haaretz v'iyei hayam. And Achashverosh replaced the tax on mas, mas, that's where it comes from, everyone knows about tax. Mas al haaretz v'al iyei hayam. Says Vilna Gaon, what's the gematria of mas? Mem samach? 100. Mem samach. 40 and 60. Mas al haaretz, 100 al haaretz, that's 100 countries which were al haaretz. V'iyei hayam, vav aleph yud yud is 27. V'iyei hayam. That's how we know it was 127. Very nice. Why am I mentioning this? When the Gaon says, but Rabbi Brevda points out, in the middle of the Megillah, or when we'll see later on, when Esther comes and he likes Esther, which is all a big nest, right? And he's trying to get out of her where she comes from, and nationality, etc. And Mordechai Tzaddik told her not to say anything. So he took off the tax off the whole world. Certain world tax, you know what I mean, wherever it is. I'm sure they didn't have problems with making taxes here. It wasn't on Chad Pami, it was on something else, whatever it was. There's always an excuse for a tax. And he took it off because he wanted to coax her to say, surely she was from 127 countries. She wasn't from any of them, but anyway, right? Because she was Jewish, and he figured, therefore, they're so happy they took off, this big tax, so therefore, she would get the thing. And then we see later on that Achashverosh, who was a money lover, when Haman says to him, look, what's the Jewish people, what's genocide between me and you? Achashverosh was no Jew lover, you should know. Again, we'll see, Rabbi Brevda points out, he was a big anti-Semite, almost, and some even say even worse than Haman. It's hard to believe, right? He was Hitler's right-hand man, or whatever, and he took the 10,000, shekels of that Haman gave over to him. He said, money talks. Took 10,000 shekels, whatever it was. Even let's say it was $10 trillion. He took $10 trillion and then he just, wipe out a whole nation for money. This is the richness of Achashverosh. However, when Achashverosh at the end of Megillah realizes that Esther is not from any of the 127, so v'yasem Achashverosh master ala haaretz v'aliyayam. Why am I wasting my money for? I was getting good money over here. I took all the tax for nothing. So Rabbi points out from the beginning, middle, and the end, all his mind was on money, right? That's what he cared about. Egoistic, money, we'll see, covered, and didn't care 2 hoots about anyone, even if it meant millions of people's lives. So that help understand what Chazal mean when Rashi says, Hu Achashverosh, Rasha me'atchala ad hasof. He didn't change. You understand? And that's an inkling that to know what of a nasty character the guy was. Right? Don't think he was an idiot, right? Some people say make it as if Haman was this evil Eichmann. Do you understand? Achashverosh is this fool. He was no fool. Rabbi Evda points out he didn't become king of the world because he was an idiot, right? You know, he was a very clever politician. Let's get it straight. You understand? He was the first Democrat. He was a very clever guy. Anyway, okay. Now, when it says Meresim Medina, Medina, we understand Medina in modern Hebrew means country. So Vilna Gaon explained it means a capital city or large city, but it was a royal city, and therefore when he meant the royal cities, it meant and the countries that go with them. Okay? Yeah? Okay. Ready for the next pasuk? Pasuk bet. Ve'amim ahem keshevet hamelech Achashverosh al kisei malchuto asher b'Shushan habira. And it was in those days when the king Achashverosh sat on his throne, which was in Shushan Habira. Now this is a very queer pasuk. Yeah. First of all, what's going on over here? Rashi says, when it says Rashi says when he gained like full control over the monarchy. Only in the third year. He says, Rabbeinu Pirshu binyan acher Masechet Megillah, which you see is in Rashi very often. Normally Rashi only brings the Medrash and the Gemaras. Rashi says this pshat and says, I see other Pirushim in the Megillah, in Masechet Megillah. However, it was Nitkayem Malchuto Biyado. What's Rashi trying to say over here? Only in the third year, he became king 3 years ago, right? He wasn't the king, he didn't have control. Well, what happened? You with me? What's Rashi referring to? Now, second of all, why in the third year? What was special about the third year? Ever thought about it? What was special about the third year? All of a sudden now in Nitkayem Biyado, what happened? Thirdly, which is the most obvious question, when he was sitting on his throne, as opposed to what? A king doesn't sit on his throne? Yeah? If you want to say something happened in the third year, so she says something we're going to see, he got complete control, whatever it was, but kings in those days had a throne, that's what they did. So it's like obvious, you want to say something happened in his third year.
In his palace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Driving his car. I mean, what difference does it make? What's the big deal? And also, Asher b'Shushan Habira. We need to know where it was. What difference does it make? And it was in 5 towns. It was in Miami Beach. What difference does it make where it was? You understand? Sure, it was a fancy place. You know what I'm saying? Right. What?
No, I mean.
Okay.
Right.
Saying more about 5 towns. I said something.
No,
okay, fine.
I'm saying, because don't we know that something about why was it in Shushan? Isn't there a whole thing?
I'm going to say no. Could be I mentioned it before, but anyway, yeah. Now, so now the Vilna Gaon goes to town. Yeah. 1 second. First of all, we said a minute ago, Rabbi Evda points out, Rashi says, Rabbi Evda makes a whole asik out of it, that Achashverosh was a commoner at the end of the day, clever guy, right? Astute politician, but he was not royal blood. In those days, royal blood meant something still. In England, the remnants of what it means maybe, royal blood. That was a real thing. Kings were kings, you know what I'm saying? He went through it, well, not stump. How he got in the first place is a bit of a mess, right? If it was only monarchy. But anyway, he managed to sort of convince everyone. Well, we see, that's another thing. He married Vashti. Vashti was a daughter of Belshazzar, who was the son of Nebuchadnezzar. So Vashti was an anacle of Nebuchadnezzar, right? She was a granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar was a fearsome king. I think we mentioned before, no? The Midrashim say that when Nebuchadnezzar ruled, no one smiled through his entire reign. No one smiled. Can you imagine such a thing? They were so petrified. People lived in fear the whole time. You can imagine such a thing? It's crazy.
You said that. You made that comment when you were in Moscow.
It's true, yeah, but I think Russian stomach depress people. But it's true, yeah. When I was in Moscow 30 years ago, it was just after the Iron Curtain came down, a year and a half after, and there were still KGB people walking around. They weren't in control. They couldn't do anything then. It was Boris Yeltsin. Remember Boris Yeltsin? I remember. You're too young. And yeah, no, it was a depressing place. I was there at the end of the winter, wherever. Everyone just walks around, Like they weren't not happy people. You understand? But it's true. You're right. They lived in fear. No, they did. People can take. They had on every floor when in the KGB, in the communist rule. They had KGB people on every floor, on every apartment block. There were people just there. just to see what was going on and listen to people said anything. You don't say, well, people petrified. You're right. So that's a modern day example. That was Nebuchadnezzar. Let's not get off track. Belshazzar was his son. Vashti was his daughter, was Belshazzar's daughter. It says in the Megillah, she's one of the most beautiful women that ever lived. Physical beauty, right? Not necessarily, she was a big Rashanta. She was no Jew lover, that's for sure. And Achashverosh, part of his thing was that he wined and dined, and he managed to marry Vashti. That was his way in. He was married to a queen. His wife was royalty, you understand? So his wife was royalty, they knew it, fine. So, right. So, but he was out to impress, do you understand? He was out to impress, and one of the big ways to impress, he wanted to have a fancy throne. He wanted to show he has the fanciest throne you ever saw in your life. You understand? Made a big impression. I think Chitzonius only started in America. You understand? It started in Paras Hamadai, a few thousand years ago. No, really, yeah? 2,500 years ago. Now, what he wanted to do was as follows. He wanted to sit on Shlomo HaMelech's throne. Shlomo HaMelech alav Shalom had a magnificent throne. The Targum Sheni explains, I saw bits quoted, and what I understand of it, it was obviously solid gold. There were 6 gold steps going up to it. They were going up altogether, 70 lions of pure gold, 70 eagles of pure gold. Can you imagine, the carvings of the pure gold. Above the throne somewhere there was like a gold menorah. There was something on top of that with like pipes coming out. There were like 24 golden grapes. It was something like solid gold. You never see anything like it. It was fantastic. It was magnificent. Achashverosh wanted to sit on that throne. If he can sit on that throne, that's, people are going to, that's impressive, you know what I mean? That is something.
Nebuchadnezzar destroyed it.
No, 1 second. Not the throne. Now, the problem was that other monarchs tried to do this in the past. One of them was a pharaoh. One of the pharaohs of Egypt tried to do this, and they say that the lions or the eagles were, but obviously not Kishub, it was something, they had life to them. They came to life. This is not Ghostbusters or anything, I'm just saying, they don't get, but they could. It came to life, and when Pharaoh went up, a lion bit him on the thigh, and he became limp. And he is known as Pharaoh the Limp. That's what it was, Paro Necheh. What now happened to him? So, Achashverosh wanted to stay whole, nice, he wanted to look good. He didn't want to be limping around anywhere, but he wanted to look good. So he had a brilliant idea. He thought he's going to get someone to make a replica. This is the beginning of the fake. You understand? The first fake thing was in 2,500 years ago, fake throne. It had to be a good fake, do you understand? It was still going to be gold, but it wasn't, the throne that came to life, but it looked pretty good. And he could only find the artisans to do this in Shushan Abira. Shushan Abira? Yeah. This town was in Hicksville somewhere, no one really heard of it so much. Shushan Abira, and he found the people to do it. Now, they worked at this for a while, and how long do you think it took them to make?
This is 3 years.
3 years. Yeah? 3 years. בימים ההם כשבט המלך אחשוורוש על כיסא מלכותו, right? אשר בשושן הבירה, and as it says in the next pasuk, let me the next pasuk, right? בשנת, I forgot the next pasuk, 3 למלכו, right? And he made this mishter. Now he made this mishter because now the 3rd years, right? The 3rd year, if I didn't realize, when I read Rashi and it came Achub Yador was the next pasuk. I'm very confused, right? I was with the next pasuk. But it says he built this throne, and the Vilna Gaon explains Bishnat when it says the next pasuk, and in the 3rd year he made this party. That's because that's when the throne finished, and soft, finally he can come and wine and dine the world on this fancy throne. Do you understand? That's what was going on. Now, what used to be in the kings of Paras Umadai, all the government offices, statesmen, royal palaces, etc., all in Bavel. They took over Bavel from Nebuchadnezzar, right? Yeah, that's why Vashti Nebuch was the Yosoima, you know what I mean? Because, right, who was it? Koresh, whoever took over, he beat Koresh, was it Koresh? Beat Belshazzar, or Koresh was his son, was the son of Achashverosh. one of the parasol, what was it? That was it the Daryavesh, who took over with Madai, right? The son of the first Achashverosh. He beat the Babylonians and took over. And Vashti was Nebuch Yesoimas. Her father was killed. Belshazzar, big Russia. Anyway, so everything was there in Bovel. They kept everything there, all the government offices. So now, if you are Achashverosh, he's got this thing in his head. He wants to show off, and this, and he's stuck because the throne was so big, it couldn't be moved. It was physically impossible to move. It was so big and massive and a solid gold, it couldn't move. So if you are Achashverosh, so you got this dilemma. He's got this throne he wants to desperately sit on, Anehami, hundreds of miles away in Shushan. For years now, everything has been in Bavel. What's he going to do? So Rabbi he suggests, he could have had like the Queen of England had, what's it called? The Balmoral, a holiday, vacation, he'd go for the summer, and then the whole summer he'd wine and dine, and everyone would come and he'd show off over there, and leave everything in Bavel. What does he do? It says, he moved the entire government offices, statesmen, everything to Shushan HaBirah. He built a royal compound in Shushan HaBirah. You understand? Which is ridiculous. That's crazy. Yeah, why? Why did he do that? Yeah. Now, why was this? Why did he do that? Oh, we're getting late. So, if you look in Perek, where is it now? Perek Bet Pasuk Chet. Perek Bet Pasuk Chet. Yeah. 1 second. Perek Bet Pasuk Chet. It says the following. It says, Vayhi bish. 1 second. No, not Perek Bet. 1 second. Not there. 1 minute. Perek Bet Pasuk Hey. Sorry, Pasuk Hey. Pasuk Hey. It says, it says, Ha'ish Yehudi, which is one of the Pasukim we read out. Yeah? The Pasukim we read out before the Chazan, the whole Tzibur reads it. Ish Yehudi Haya b'Shushan HaBirah Shmo Mordechai ben Yair ben Shmi ben Kish Ish Yemini. Mordechai Yehudi Haya b'Shushan HaBirah. Now the Pasuk carries on. It says, Asher hogla miYerushalayim im hagola sheheglota im Yochanan melech Yehuda shehogla nimchanetzah melech Bavel. It mentions hogla, hagola, heglata 3 times. It says the Vilna Gaon, Mordechai Tzaddik was exiled. He went back to Yerushalayim and came back again, and back to Yerushalayim 3 times. He tried to go back in this period of Bavel, and he was exiled 3 times. And he finally rested up in Shushan HaBirah. Mordechai Tzaddik was going to be the key player in the Yeshua, the salvation of the Jewish people. As the Rebbe points out, the Megillah, the Masechet Megillah says that Hashem always prepares the refuah lifnei hamakah, right? Hashem, even though there was going to be, when he explained why there was Xer, what happened, Hashem had everything ready. If we're going to do tshuva, then everything's already there. Yeah, the refuah is there before the makkah, right? The medicine, the healing thing is there beforehand. Mordechai Tzaddik, with Esther being his niece, whatever it was going to be the ones which were going to bring the Yeshua. When Klal Yisrael were going to do teshuvah, he was in Shushan HaBirah. Said HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Mordechai has been around enough. He's been exiled back and forth and this and that. Enough. But he needs to be the key player. I'm going to take the whole of the world monarchy and move everything to Shushan HaBirah. You hear that? That, says the Vilna Gaon, is why he had this wacky idea to move everything to Shushan HaBirah. And the fact it couldn't be moved, and that's why he decided that. And it's on this pasuk that the Vilna Gaon says, I mentioned you last week, why you have to read every single pasuk. Because in every single pasuk, it's telling you something to do with the nest, which we said, Atzat Hashem. Even this pasuk seems like we said a completely random pasuk. Why do you think he's obviously sitting on his throne with the next pasuk in the 3rd year? What's going on over here? There's a lot going on. This is all Atzat Hashem. I want to be in Shushan HaBirah, so it's ready for Mordechai Tzaddik. Alright, we'll leave it there for today. We didn't even get, we still got 2 and a bit pasukim. Okay,